folks, HR Funk here with number 35 in my series on law enforcement qualification course challenge videos. Now if you've not seen any of the videos in this series up to this point, what I'm attempting to do is to fire a law enforcement firearms qualification course from each of the 50 states for the purpose of comparing and contrasting those courses and ultimately trying to determine what I think is the best law enforcement firearms qualification course in the country. This series does focus on duty handgun qualification courses, and I may do one in the future on rifles and shotgun qualifications. Today's law enforcement handgun qualification course comes to us from the state of New York. Now, from what I've been able to gather, there is a lot of variation in the state of New York with regard to the type of qualification courses used by different agencies and different firearms instructors. The course that I have here was sent to me by two different sources, and it's labeled as the Department of Criminal Justice Service qualification course, so I'm assuming this is one of the more common courses used in the state of New York, so this is the one I'm going to use to represent this state. This course is divided into 4 different stages that take place at distances as close as 3 yards from the target and as far away as 25 yards from the target, and each stage has its own instructions, which I will explain before I start to shoot through that stage, just like I always do, so you know what you're about to see before I start to shoot it. Also, today's challenger. Once upon a time, the city of New York used to authorize this firearm for officers there, and I thought this would be a good one to use for this qualification. This is actually a former duty weapon of mine. This is my Smith & Wesson 9mm model 5943 SSV double action only pistol. I think it's going to be fun to shoot through this course, and I think we're going to see how it does. One last thing before I kick things off, folks, and that involves the target that's used for qualification. Now, along with all the latitude that's given for the type of course that's used for qualification in New York, it seems as though the target that's used is really up to the firearms instructor who's conducting the qualification. Since I'm the firearms instructor conducting this qualification, I thought it would be fun to use the old traditional B27 target on this course. And what I'm going to say is anything striking inside of the 8 ring on the B27 counts toward qualification. Anything outside of the 8 ring doesn't count as qualification. Now, in order to be considered qualified at the end of this course, shooters have to score 70%, which means of the 50 shots that are required for the course, 35 of them are going to have to be inside the 8 ring in order for the shooter to be considered qualified. And it's time to kick things off. The first stage of this New York qualification course begins at a distance of 3 yards from the target, and it's divided into 2 different phases. Now, this is another one of these courses that really gives you very little in the way of specific instructions on how the stage is to be fired. For example, there's nothing to indicate whether the shooter begins with the firearm in the holster and secured or starts in a low ready position or anything else. What it says is 3-yard line dash 12 rounds fired in 2 phases. Phase 1, 6 rounds fired in 2-round increments with no time limit. So for the first phase of this first stage, on the signal to fire, the shooter has to fire 2 rounds into the body of the target. I'm not sure if there's a draw required or not. There's nothing to indicate that it is. And there's no time limit, so the shooter can take however long the shooter wants to fire those 2 rounds into the target, and that's done 3 times for a total of 6 rounds. Then in phase 2, again, nothing about how the pistol is supposed to begin, holster, in the hand, or whatever. But in phase 2, the shooter has to fire 6 shots into the body of the target in a time limit of 6 seconds. So let's see how this looks. Quick point of clarification. In case you heard a beep partway through that string of 6 shots that I just fired, actually I had my timer randomly set on 5 seconds for those double taps that I was firing to begin with, just to have an end time since there was nothing required in the course description. and I forgot to change it when I fired the 6 shots. So I actually fired those 6 shots in 5.98 seconds, so still made it in under the 6-second time limit for that second phase of stage 1. For stage 2 of this New York course, I'm back to a distance of 7 yards from the target. From here, this stage is again divided into 2 phases, and the first phase is identical to phase 1 of stage 1. It requires me to fire 6 shots into the target in 2-shot increments with no time limit whatsoever. The second time through, I fire 12 shots in 25 seconds with a reload. So I'll load my magazine 6 and 6, fire out 6, perform my reload, and fire 6 more shots in that 25-second time limit. For stage 4, I'm back to a distance of 15 yards from the target, and from here, once again, I'm going to be firing 12 shots with a reload. This time the time limit is 40 seconds. Fourth and final stage of the New York course, folks, and this takes place at a distance of 25 yards from the target. And from here, the shooter has to fire 8 shots, once again with a reload, so I'm going to load my magazines 4 and 4. So 8 shots with a reload in a time limit of 40 seconds. Well, I'll say this much for the New York course, folks. It's fast. If you have a lot of officers you have to get through qualification and you don't have a lot of time to do it, this is the course you want to use. Unfortunately, that's about the only compliment that I can give it. Basically, this is another one of these courses that's just a pure marksmanship test. Now, that being said, from 25 yards, I did manage to pull 3 of my shots outside of the 8 ring. So I ended up with a 94% on the course. But even so, there's really, the time limits are very generous. There's no ambidextrous shooting. There's no shooting from behind cover. There's really nothing to this other than just standing and shooting. And there are 2 phases that are completely untimed. So there's not a lot of stress in this. And I'm not trying to be critical. To those of you in New York, don't take this personally. I'm not talking about you and saying your firearm skills are deficient or anything like that. I'm just saying that this particular course doesn't have a lot of challenge to it. Now, I'm certain, as I've said with other states, there are probably a lot of departments and a lot of firearms instructors that require skill far over and above this course. And I think that's good. And this, of course, is just a minimum standards type of a course. But even so, this is probably one that could benefit from a revision and really adding a few more critical skills in there to get the shooter a little bit more in tune with defensive use of firearms and trying to survive a gunfight. In any case, that's the New York course, and that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you leave those for me. Remember, if you order anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. Oh, by the way, folks, I almost forgot. Here's the final look at today's Challenger. My 5943 performed flawlessly. I managed to blow a few shots with it, but those are my fault, not the pistol's fault. It performed very well. Again, that's the video for today, and that's 35 courses that are down so far in this series. I've got 15 to go, and then I'll finally be able to pick the course that I think is the best law enforcement firearms qualification course in the country. See you next time, folks. And until then, as I said, good shooting. Bye-bye.